Hi everybody, this is Amanda Augustine, Top Resumes career expert. I also represent Top Interview and Top CV, and I'm happy to be back today to answer more of your job search questions. If you ever want to get your resume reviewed for free, you can always submit it at topresume.com/resume-review. I'm sure my colleagues will put that in the comments for you. And if you are viewing this internationally and you use a CV in order to search for a job, then you can also request a free CV review at topcv.co.uk or topcv.com, both of those /CV review. I'm so excited to be with you all today. I don't know where all of you are from. I would love for you in the comments to just let me know, where are you viewing this from? How are you doing in this crazy time? I am actually broadcasting live from Long Island. That's where my family lives. You will more likely than not hear my 4-year-old downstairs screaming at some point because he wants to be on camera right now. And he's adorable, but he's going to just not let me answer any questions. So he's downstairs playing with Daddy right now, and hopefully he will stay down there for the duration of this show. I was on a couple weeks ago and it was a really great success. I loved talking with all of you, answering your questions. And so I want to start doing this more regularly, at least for the foreseeable next few weeks, and we'll take it as we do with everything right now. We'll take it as it goes and see if there's an appetite, and if there is, and if there are questions to be answered, I will continue to come back. I'm going to try and make it a regular thing at this same time every Tuesday, so it's just something we can all get used to and expect to see. So if your question doesn't get answered today, you can always try again. But again, we're going to talk for quite a while, so I'm hoping to get through most of your questions. Feel free to put any question you have in the comments below. Even just give me a shout out, say hi, let me know where you're viewing this from. I don't know about you all, but yesterday it was torrential downpour. It was dark, it was gloomy. It was not a really great way to start a Monday, another week in this in this fun time of COVID. And so I'm really relieved to see that we've got a little bit of sun outside now. Any little bit helps to get us through this, right? I thought it would be interesting, fun, to tell you a little bit about what's happened since the last time I've talked to all of you, because I'd like you to get to know me a little bit better and understand that I'm totally with you in all of this chaos that's going on right now. Little Rock, Arkansas. Thanks for joining me, Michael. So couple things that have happened. As you know, I am working remotely. My husband is actually considered an essential worker, and so he has been going out every day and working. He's in a small family business, and so that means, working weekends, working kind of crazy hours. And so that's kind of what our lives consisted of up until a week ago Saturday, when we have a little boat and we decided to take our 4-year-old out on it. Little sunset cruise around the bay, nothing big, anything to feel like we're getting out and about and, maintaining social distance. And my son is a daddy's boy, and he's a mommy's boy, but he loves his daddy when it comes to boats and fishing and all things like that. And he was following a little too closely behind his daddy, and his daddy opened up the hatch to throw a buoy in. And my son decided to put his thumb down right there, and my husband closed the hatch. And then my son proceeded to rip his hand out, because that's a normal reaction for a 4-year-old who doesn't know what's going on, and literally almost severed the entire top half of his thumb. And so the one thing you don't want to be doing right now during this time is showing up in an ER when you don't have to, but we certainly had to. But we were very fortunate. Someone was looking out for us because we happened to be near the hospital. It was not crazy when we got in there, at least. And the doctor on call that night happened to be a hand surgeon. So the stars aligned. He is fine. He is running around like a maniac downstairs, A-okay. Doctor expects him to make a full recovery. But we were in the emergency room for a number of hours waiting for the surgeon to get there, going through all that funness. And there were so many COVID positive patients coming through. I mean, there were on the other side of the curtain, on my back, I could hear this woman coughing, and heard that, she was COVID positive. And so out of a precaution, I mean, we did wear gloves and masks. They couldn't put one on my 4-year-old because he wasn't going to leave it on, and he was in quite a bit of pain. But the whole family is now self-quarantining for 2 weeks to make sure that if we have been exposed and we have contracted it, that we can't spread it to anyone else. And so my work from home situation just got a whole lot messier because now we're all here. My husband's trying to run a business that he really needs to be in the store for, from our home, and the little childcare help we had. Obviously we're not going to have that anymore because we want to flatten the curve and make sure we're not injuring anyone. So that's my fun little story since the last time we spoke. Love to know what's going on with everybody else. If you're just joining me, thank you so much. My name is Amanda Augustine. I'm the resident career expert for Top Resume, Top Interview, as well as Top CV, our international brand. And I'm here to talk all about the job search. During this time, during other times, I'm here to answer your questions. This is actually a very unstructured live chat. I'm just popping in, and I do have a few questions people have already asked me. I'm happy to go into particular tips, but I really want to use this time to answer any questions that have popped up since the last time I was live. I'm happy to answer the same questions again if people need them. I want to make sure that you're getting whatever resources I can possibly offer that are going to help you move forward with your career search, secure employment, make the career change, whatever it is, whether it's this time or, it's in a few months from now. What can I do to make sure that you have the information you need and that you feel properly armed and prepared to go after this job search? So if it's all right with you all, I'd like to answer a few questions that have come in, and I am going to turn to my side every so often because I have a laptop here with some questions. I also, in some very fantastic Sharpie marker, jotted down some that came through other channels as well. One that's popped up a few times, and I think I addressed this last time and I'll address it again. Is it still worth searching now? Is it still worth it given, the number of unemployment claims and everything that's going on? And I'd say 100% yes. It is still worth looking for a job. If you were one of those people who has a job, you are in that very fortunate position right now, but you weren't happy in it before this all happened, and this isn't necessarily making you suddenly love your job, and you're still interested in making a move, yeah, 100% keep looking. Definitely, clarify your job goals, know what you want, do the research, look into the companies. There are companies still hiring. It's just you have to be a bit more strategic about what you go after. So 100%, if you were considering a new job before all this happened, there's nothing wrong with continuing to explore those options and see what's out there. But you have to set expectations for yourself. It is a crazy economy at the moment. It's a crazy job market. It's been flooded with a lot of new competition, a lot of new candidates. And so it may take longer to get the job, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't still pursue it. And if nothing else, put in all the legwork now so that when things do rebound, you're poised to immediately jump on those new opportunities. Take the time now to make sure you know what you're really looking for, to update your resume or CV, to get the structure of a cover letter together that you can then leverage for different applications, to identify certain companies that are of interest to you, update that LinkedIn profile, start talking to people. It's interesting. I had an interview with Business Insider maybe last week, and we were talking about, what can you be doing to advance your career in the middle of this if you're stuck at home. And, I laughed because the first thing that occurred to me was I wouldn't have any time to do that. But I really feel like people kind of fall into one of two camps. You're either overwhelmed with trying to work from home, handle your children's daycare, handle your children's, homeschooling, navigate all of this with a partner who's also trying to work. My husband and I are now on this thing where it's like we each get a couple hours of chunks of time and then we kind of swap off to watch over our child. There's not a lot of free time. It feels like actually there's not a lot of free time to do much other than just kind of survive right now. But then there's an entire other bucket of people who don't necessarily have all those kind of extra stresses. There are other stresses, don't get me wrong. The isolation alone is awful. You could be hunting for a job, and that's a full-time job. We all know that, and not a fun one at that. But there's definitely a group of people. It hadn't occurred to me that, they actually have a little bit more time on their hands because you can only work so many hours a day. And if that's kind of all you can do, you can work out in your room, you can watch movies, you can read. But if you're really stuck at home and you don't necessarily have to worry about homeschooling dependence and things of that nature, there's actually some free time. And the silver lining to this whole pandemic is that you could actually focus on some of those career development activities that we kind of always say, well, if I had more time, I'd do that. Or, someday I'll get to that. Well, there's actually some time to actually set aside a chunk and tackle some of those things, which I think is interesting. And so, for those who do have a little bit of time on their hands or, are really, really great at time management, much better than I am, this could be the time to at least get all your ducks in a row for a more comprehensive job search once the economy rebounds. Now, that's not realistic for everyone. That's if, hey, you don't love your job and you're considering moving to another job, but you're employed right now and you're working remotely and that's your thing. I know there are so many people out there who have lost their jobs or are on furlough or have had their hours drastically reduced or perhaps self-employed and the clients are dwindling or the projects are starting to dwindle because of everything that's going on. A lot of people are in this, hiatus, this little, purgatory, so to speak, as to what's going to happen. And I know that for those people, I need to find work. I need to find work now. And I'm happy to go over some of those resources again and share that with you all. But we focused a lot on what are the resources you can use, and if my colleagues could reshare in the comments that one article we put up that's really comprehensive, has all of those different resources for finding remote work, for finding part-time jobs, for finding opportunities that may not be published on the main job boards because the companies don't have time to do it, but everyone's kind of pitching in to let you know where those opportunities lie. There's even a really great resource on that one article that's all these random ways you can make money online while you're sitting at home. And I mean, some of them are really kind of random, it's like sell stuff on eBay, but then there's other ones that are a bit more structured, a bit more realistic for a longer period of time and things of that nature. We talked a lot about where can you find the jobs. I'd like to talk a little bit more today about what are all the other, if you find the job, great, now what do you do? How do you make sure that if you find an opportunity that really makes sense, how do you set yourself up for success, for a greater likelihood to get that phone screen or get that virtual interview? What are all those things you should think about? And so I kind of want to run down some of those unless there's a question that somebody wants to ask right away. And please feel free to start putting those questions in the comments. I do have a couple. So the first one was, is it still worth searching? Yes, 100%. I even did a podcast a week or so ago, I think it was last week, with a group of people who were all specifically interested in making a career change. And they were asking, well, is it realistic to make a career change? I actually think right now is a really great time. If this whole experience made you start reconsidering or questioning your employer, and is this the place you want to work, and does this work for you? I think this is actually a really great time to sit there and say, perhaps this is the time for me to make a bigger move. Everything's kind of jumbled up anyway. Maybe I should start exploring what would I do if I'm not doing what I'm doing now? Where would I work if I wasn't working at this place? What would I want to do? This is actually a really great time to explore what a change might look like, to talk to people and get a better sense of, if I were to make this transition, what skills would I need to bulk up? How would I need to translate some of the experience on my resume into terms that this new prospective type of employer would appreciate, because I've reframed it in their industry jargon, in their field. How can I make some of my experience, how can I transfer it, the skills that I've been building in other roles, how can I now apply them to a different role? I think actually this is a really great time to do some soul searching. And, you know, if there's a skill that's missing, look for opportunities, whether it's an online course, whether, you know, it's taking on and making a passion project. Maybe it's even doing some sort of skill-based volunteer opportunity, or identifying a cause that you're already really passionate about and applying a different skill set there so that you can build that skill and then, of course, demonstrate it, illustrate that experience on your resume. So 100%, if you were considering making a change, don't back away from it. I think you may have to delay when that actual change happens because it's going to depend on what roles are available. But at the same time, you have this great opportunity where you can do some exploration. I mean, if you're working right now, you're working remotely 9 times out of 10. Not everybody. If you're an essential worker, completely different ball game. But if you're working remotely, no one's staring over your shoulder, right? I mean, this is the opportunity where maybe you can have an e-learning thing up. Maybe you can attend a webinar that wouldn't necessarily link to what you're doing. Maybe you look into an online course that you didn't know how you would fit into your workday with the commute and everything before. Well, this is the time to now consider those options. So definitely don't be afraid of those. Okay. I do have a bunch of questions here, but I do want to get into some of the components about what makes a really strong job search from the get-go. And I always say this, it's incredibly important. And I don't care if it's a short-term goal for now to get you past this hurdle, this pandemic and the job losses that are going on, or if it's more that long-term goal. The first thing you need to start with is a clear goal. And that may mean that you need to explore your options and see what's available. If you're considering a longer job search where you're trying to get to a specific point, perhaps you're just working something short time now, but you know you want a longer term, more permanent opportunity in the coming months. I think you can prepare for those at the same time. You need to be clear on what your goal is, and that may require some research just to understand, well, what opportunities are available. And so, Jenna, if you could share that link. Oh, you did. Thank you. So there's a comment from Top Resume that says how to find work during coronavirus. That is the link that will give you all of the resources that I talked about in the last chat. And this is a lot of stuff. It will include both long-term opportunities. It's beyond your regular job boards. These are all really cool resources that our team dug up that I was really excited about. It's also some short-term stuff as well, but it's a whole mix in there about how you can find different opportunities right now. So be clear on the goal. Be clear on what you're trying to do. It's okay if you have to go outside your regular career path to find work now. It's okay if you have to kind of switch an industry because yours is not hiring at the moment. That's okay. Apply your skills to a different industry for the short term. Do what you need to do. I don't think any employer is going to fault you for making a few, turns outside of the traditional career path during this time. Everybody gets, in my opinion, a pass during this time. I don't think you're going to have issues with that. It would be really, really ridiculous and illogical and irrational for any employer to hold it against you that you took a bunch of short-lived jobs during this time to make ends meet because, frankly, your industry wasn't hiring. And it just was harder to look for work at this point. So please don't be afraid of that. But going back, be clear on the goals. Once you have an idea of what the goal is, whether it's a radical change from what you've been doing or it's along the same lines of what you have been doing, maybe a step up, that sort of thing, then you have to think about, okay, as I'm looking at job descriptions, as I'm talking to people in the industry and getting better sense of what are the requirements for this role, not only what would I be expected to do should I take on this job, what would be my responsibilities and my tasks, but also what are the requirements that they're asking for. This is going to basically provide a blueprint for reworking your resume or CV. My top tip when you're getting ready to update your resume or CV is always collect 3 to 5 job descriptions that describe the type of role that you want to pursue and you believe you are qualified to perform. And for the purposes of updating your resume or your CV, don't be as concerned about where's the permanent location when we're all allowed to leave our homes and roam freely. You know, it is much more about, does this job describe the type of role I'm looking for? Do I feel confident that I am qualified for it? Looking at these job descriptions will help you identify, well, what parts of my past, my skill set, my experience, my education, do these employers care the most about? Let me make sure that's what I'm emphasizing on my resume or CV, as well as on my LinkedIn profile. And then, is there anything that keeps popping up that they're obviously interested in that I frankly don't have? If there's one thing that's always required and I don't have it, well, now's the time to brainstorm. Is there anything I can do to gain that piece of experience, to develop that skill set outside of the work, that will help me then be a stronger candidate? Because you can't invent experience on a resume, right? I mean, at Top Resume, at Top CV, our job is to take your story and tell the best version of it. But we can't fabricate information. We can't suddenly say you have a skill set that you don't possess. Honestly, that has to come from you. We can help you tell the best career narrative. We can help you tell the best version of that story so that it's very clear how your experience in education and things in and outside the workplace have led you to this type of role at this type of company. But we can't necessarily say you possess a skill that you don't possess. And, you know, we can't demonstrate that you have that skill if you haven't given that to us. So that's something to think about. As you're looking at these job descriptions, is there a glaring gap in your skills or experience? There's 2 ways to address this. If it's a hard skill, it might be something that you can gain an online certification on. You could maybe talk to your boss about, hey, you know, is there a way for me to take on a project, or, you know, that sort of thing? There may be some wiggle room there. Again, I know it's a little more challenging when we're all working remotely, but something to keep in mind. There's so many online courses available today. I have a really comprehensive list of them, actually. And so I'll throw some of them out here, but I'll even, if you guys don't mind, I'll stare at my screen for a second because I know I emailed a list to a friend very recently. But just off the top of my head, you've got Skillshare, Coursera, edX, Lynda.com turned into LinkedIn Learning. LinkedIn bought them, and now it's all into LinkedIn Learning. That one definitely is for fee, I believe. There's a really good one. I'm gonna have to find it. I don't want to bore you guys while I hunt for this, but hold on one second. Oh, actually, Jenna, we did a great article on this recently. Could you pull up that Top Resume article that we wrote that had a list of all these different online courses? I think Rhonda may have written it. All the different online courses of where you can develop your skills. I mean, it was everything from learning languages to building soft skills to building technical skills. I think that's a really great resource. If anybody is realizing, either through their conversations with people who work in the industry they want to join, or you're looking at these job descriptions and realizing they keep asking for a skill that you just haven't had an opportunity to develop, this is now the time to get a little creative and see, well, is there a way for me to start filling that gap on my own remotely? Now, if it's an experience gap, that's really hard, right? It's like, well, I need the job to get the experience, give me the job. If you're trying to fill an experience gap, you can get a little creative, right? If it's something where you could look for a skill-based volunteer opportunity, you can find them on sites like Catchafire. That's kind of my go-to one. But if you Google skill-based volunteer opportunities, you'll find sites that are dedicated to identifying opportunities within nonprofits and other causes where they're looking for skills. Let me just see, I want to make sure I'm not missing any comments here. where they're looking, they're looking for someone to help them with a project, but they can't pay for it, right? And so I think it's very, helpful. If that's not your deal, I know I was talking to someone where, hey, I have a friend who's really passionate about helping, dogs that are in shelters and stuff like that. If there's an organization that does that kind of stuff and you're very much interested in that, perhaps it's, hey, I'd love to write up your PR plan, for free, because I personally want to work on that skill set so I can say I've been developing it. But B, this is an organization that I'd love to help. That's a great opportunity. So just to recap, we're talking about once you have an idea of what's the job you're after, gather 3 to 5 job descriptions that all describe the role that you're interested in pursuing and you feel that you're pretty qualified for. Go through those, and that will help you understand, well, what types of experience, what types of skills are they expecting the candidate to possess? Beyond just the responsibilities, what are they looking for? Because I want to make sure I'm expressing that on my resume or my CV and my LinkedIn profile. And then I also think this exercise helps you identify any glaring gaps there might be. If it's a skill-based gap, you might be able to fill it in yourself, either through an online course, through an online certification, actually doing e-learning. There's so many options out there, and we have a really great article on this. But also, in addition to that, if it's more of an experience thing, you might be able to take on side projects, do side gigs, something outside your regular job that will allow you to develop that piece of experience that you're not getting in your existing role, or perhaps you're unemployed right now, so obviously you're not getting it through your existing situation. But look for those opportunities. If it's really, and I think you have to have that hard conversation with yourself. If you're looking at it and they're looking for a level of experience that you just haven't been exposed to, what you might need to do is adjust your goals. If it seems like there's a stepping stone job that you missed along the way, perhaps now's the time to identify, well, what is that other job? And consider, is that the right move for you that will develop the right base level skill sets, the right foundation, so then you can ultimately get to your long-term goal. I have to say, I'm not the person who says, dream job, everyone's going to get their dream job. And I'm a little bit more pragmatic than that. I think there are a lot of jobs that are truly a joy to do. I love what I do for a living. Are there good times and bad times? 100%. I also think this idea of, I want my dream job and this is exactly what I'm going to go for today. I think we also need to be very realistic about, do you have the experience and skill sets to go for that job today? Or do you need to find either a bridge job, or also known as a stepping stone job, that will help you build the right level of experience and skill set so that you're more qualified for the job you ultimately want to get to. If there's a job out there and you're like, that's the job I want, go look for people on LinkedIn who have that job. Look for people who have a similar title, that are working in a similar industry, and start looking at their employment history. That's a really great way for you to identify, well, what are some of the paths I could take to ultimately get to the job I want? Is it the next logical step for me? Or does it look like I might have to build experience in a couple other areas before I can make that leap? So we've talked a lot about how can you identify some clues from looking at job descriptions to help you bolster that resume or CV and ensure that you're telling the story that employers would like to see for that type of candidate when they're trying to hire. Some other things to keep in mind. 75% of online applications typically go through some sort of screening process. Actually, I lied. That is completely not the right fact. Let's try that again. Rewind. 75% of online applications are screened out by a piece of software known as an applicant tracking system. And it's important to keep in mind because when you're writing your resume or CV, you need to keep multiple audiences in mind. There is, yes, the ultimate hiring manager who you'd hope would be able to look at your experience and understand why you're a good fit, but they're more often than not the first person who's going to look at that resume, that application. There are a few layers in. And so in many organizations, specifically large ones or ones that are using a recruiting agency to help with their recruitment efforts, or maybe they're using in-house recruiters, there are often other gatekeepers that your application has to get through before it's going to reach the decision maker. And so you need to write your application with those different gatekeepers in mind, because it has to pass through those before it's ultimately going to get to the person that understands you. The first of which is that electronic gatekeeper, the applicant tracking system. And when it comes to that, and again, I've done a lot of talks on applicant tracking software and the pitfalls and all that kind of fun. Something to keep in mind, although the software is continuing to evolve, it's still much better at weeding what it deems to be the least qualified people out, as opposed to cherry picking the best qualified candidates. And that's largely done through the keywords it's identifying on a resume or CV. So something to keep in mind is that when you are developing your resume, there are certain things that if you do this, it's going to have issues when it goes through the applicant tracking system. One is if you are copying and pasting any type of imagery into your resume. Those systems can't read it. Any information stored in those images will not come through when your application is parsed by one of these systems, when it's scanned and then the different bits of information are pulled into fields. So that's important to keep in mind. You want to avoid custom fonts, custom bullet points or symbols or anything like that. If you're using anything that's not kind of standard, you're probably gonna have issues with it. Don't stylize your name and all your contact information and insert it as a JPEG. That won't come through. It used to be, and I used to be like, no columns, nothing like that. Well, I've learned more and I'm modifying that answer now. Your resume or CV can have a left-hand column of information and then a main body, but it can't have I'm sure I'm doing this backwards for you guys, but it can't have a column on the right side. It can't have like a direct line down. That somehow doesn't get parsed, but a left side one does. I can't explain the mechanics of that, but I had somebody who I know understands this stuff explain that to me. Be careful about putting information in either the header section or the footer section of a Word document. Those often get scrambled. Believe it or not, not every applicant tracking system can read a PDF. So if the system, as you're uploading your application, does not specifically say that it accepts PDFs, you are much better to put it in as a Word document, because those can be read. Yes, I know it can get kind of scrambly looking, but it actually can be parsed properly. Applicant tracking systems favor a very clear hierarchy of information. And so when you keep things in a clear hierarchy where there's headers and sub information and it's all very neat like that, it actually reads it very well. So that's important to keep in mind. If you're not sure if your resume or CV is applicant tracking or robot friendly, there are a few things you can do. One, if you open up Notepad on your computer or like a plain text file, if you copy everything that's in your resume or CV and paste it into the Notepad or the plain text file, that's a really good indication. If something comes out in squiggles, if suddenly a piece of information is very far away where it should have been, it doesn't make sense, it somehow got moved. If information is missing, if there are weird symbols, that means that your application is not necessarily going to fare well when it goes through an applicant tracking system. Another way to get a better understanding of whether or not your resume is going to be parsed correctly and that you understand and appreciate your skill set. If you submit it for a free resume review at topresume.com/resume-review, I will let my teammates put that in a URL for you in the comments. But if you go to Top Resume and click for a free review, or if you go to Top CV and click for a free review, part of our review process is also letting you know what the system thinks are your top skills, what the system thinks is the role that you're pursuing, what it thinks your contact information is, your most recent job, those sorts of things. If you look at that and say, yeah, no, that's not at all what I said on my document, what are you smoking? That's not right. It means that the system isn't reading it properly. So there needs to be some rejiggering in order to get it into the right format. So that's something important to keep in mind. The other thing I'd note is, let's go back to those job descriptions that we pulled as examples to help you identify what pieces of information are really important to include or highlight in your resume. If you are, once you're looking at those job descriptions, look for the terms that are routinely popping up on all of them. How often is a certain skill set mentioned? How often is a certain term mentioned, or a piece of software they want you to be familiar with? Whatever those things are, make sure you're including those words in your resume. Again, one thing we talk a lot about is keyword optimization. And it's a really fancy way for saying, hey, if these terms are popping up all over the job descriptions that interest you, you want to make sure that not only are you demonstrating that you possess that skill, but you are actually reiterating those same terms verbatim in your resume, because that increases your chances of being perceived as a potential match, or even better, being perceived as not a bad match by the system. It also helps that initial person. Oftentimes, if it passes through the robots, there's also there's also an individual who's typically, entry level, or maybe they're known specifically as a sourcer at the organization that may not be entry level at all. But there's typically someone whose job is just to kind of quickly review the applications and get it down to a smaller, more manageable pile before it goes on to someone else. They're also scanning for particular keywords. They're also looking for little bits of information that, they've been told to look for. And so again, by reiterating, by looking at the job description, and they're saying they want to know if I've done that, I should make sure that I've mentioned that in my responsibilities for that recent job. Again, you're increasing your chances of getting to the next phase of that job search process. I'm going to pop in here because I see some questions. Okay. Hi, Lilia. Okay. How do you handle a job you were only at for 4 months and you were fired from? Okay. Great question. First of all, I'm debating really in my head, is it worth showing that you were recently employed, or is it more damaging to show that you were only in a job for the last 4 months? Here's my take on it. If you started this job, let's see, what month are we in? I'm not too sure of when that time frame was. If your previous job started in 2020 or ended in 2020, let's rephrase that. There are two different ways you can go with this. It's really the debate that's going on in my head right now is, do we show the job at all on your resume? One thing to keep in mind is your resume is a marketing document. It should be carefully curated, the information in it. You choose what you're showing and what you're not showing. This isn't lying. This is just, what information do I want to show that will present me in the best possible light? Now, if you started that role, in late 2019, and it recently ended, I might put it on there just because you don't want to say that you've been unemployed since 2019, because there's such a large block there, right? And so I definitely still put it on there. Here are the things. It's kind of, if you were, I guess, Lilia, if you can explain, were you fired or were you laid off? Because that is a big difference. If you were laid off, that is going around like no other. So really not a lot to worry about. If you were fired recently and it was during all the COVID stuff, I think you don't really have to worry about it much, because, if you had recently started the job and that company could have been having layoffs, you would have been probably one of the first people let go because you were the last in, right? And so I actually don't think it's as big of a deal now as it could have been, a few months ago or last year. So I'd put the job on there. I would put a very short blurb about, you know, what were your responsibilities. And if there was anything that was worth showing off that was like a major contribution or something like that, I'd put that as a bullet. But I'd add the job, but I wouldn't put a lot of information around it. And then I think you can, you know, if you started in 2019 and it ended in 2020, I'd probably, in terms of the start and end dates, I'd put a month and a year, and then you'd have to be consistent with that throughout the rest. Something to keep in mind for anyone out there who's trying to figure out what's the best way to display my previous experience. You don't necessarily have to put month and year for start and end dates. You could just do year. You honestly want to look at it and say, well, which is the best for me, which would make the most sense, which is going to, you know, paint me in the best light. And so I think it's really going to depend on when, you know, what are your dates of employment, and that would help me decide if I'm going to list it or not. If you get into an interview and they're like, well, what happened? Okay, don't lie, because if you were not laid off, don't say you were laid off, because frankly, they can check. However, you can say, it's really going to depend on the situation, but you know, what I typically, you know, revert to is, you know, I took on this job, I had a certain expectation, it turned out the job was different, and you know, my boss and I both decided this wasn't the right fit for me. What I've learned from that situation is that in my next role, I'm really looking for an opportunity that allows me to use these skills, or it's this type of environment. And so I think the best part is that if you were fired from a job, and you're asked about it in the interview process or anything like that, or even with networking connections as they're trying to help you, what I would recommend doing is mention it and move on and focus more on what did that experience teach you about yourself? What was the lesson there? I think that's the most important thing, is that, hey, you know, we don't all always win. We don't all always have triumphs. You know, there are going to be failures. There are going to be firings. There are going to be places where we get there and we're like, I'm quitting. This is not where I want to be. You know, that stuff happens. And I think that we all have to accept that. But the more important thing is, well, what did you learn from that experience? Did it help you understand a little bit more about what you're looking for in a role? Did it help you understand what type of environment you want to be in? Did it help you identify a skill that you needed to improve? And more importantly, what are the steps you're taking now to improve it? That's what I'd really focus on. Sorry, I'm looking back. Okay, so October to February and will not get a reference. Okay, I would put the job. Say you start October 2014, ended February 2020. You don't have to get a reference there. If prospective employers are asking for references, use other places of employment. And then depending on the situation and how you left things, it sounds like it wasn't a great departure. That's okay. Don't get into the nitty gritty. Don't talk about how it was the worst place you ever worked. Don't talk about this huge mistake you made that cost a lot, you know, that was a big issue. Instead, just focus on, more importantly, I was doing this type of work. I was in this type of environment. Things didn't work out. But what I realized from that situation is that in my next role, I would much rather work in this type of environment, or I'm looking for this type of job, or I want to make sure that in my next opportunity, I get to leverage this skill set, because what I learned from this last job is that my real strengths and talents lie here, not there. And I want to make sure that the opportunity I'm going towards is going to leverage those. And again, it's hard without knowing exactly what the situation is. If you're really concerned and it's more of how am I going to talk about this when I'm talking to people, consider talking to an interview coach. Top Interview, that's what they do for a living. You can book one where it's going to be a virtual environment, so you can do it whenever, and tell them it's like, this is the question I'm struggling with. I mean, they'll go through an entire mock interview, but they'll drill down on whatever you're most concerned about and help you feel comfortable navigating that question and telling a a narrative that is comfortable, that's real, but really does help you get past that and make you feel confident about how you'd move past that. It is hard without the specifics, and I don't necessarily want you to give every specific on here for every, everyone to read and see. But I think for anybody who's been fired and is kind of struggling, it's important that, yes, you're gonna have, if it's brought up, if it's not brought up, maybe they'll assume it had something to do with layoffs. You don't have to go there if they don't directly ask you. That is important to remember. Not everyone is so laser focused on those dates, and I think we're gonna see a little more flexibility around that stuff just given what's going on right now. So keep that in mind. 2, if they do directly ask you, you do not have to get into the nitty gritty. In fact, I highly suggest you don't, because you're more likely to get emotional about it, because things are gonna pop out of your mouth that they don't need to know. There are a number of reasons why a job doesn't work out. It just ended up not being the wrong fit. I went in there with a different set of expectations. I thought I was going to be leveraging this skill set, and it turns out they were doing this. Or, it just turned out the boss and I did not see eye to eye. Whatever it is, it's something short. You don't want to go into too many details, but you really want to focus on what I learned from this experience is that this is what I care about. This is what, this is the skill set that I want to leverage. This is the type of organization I want to work for, blah, blah, blah. And wouldn't you know, that's exactly the type of role you're applying for right now or interviewing for. Again, you're leading it always back. It's like touch upon it, focus more on the lessons learned, and bring it back around to how those things have helped you set you on the course towards the type of job you're interviewing for today, the type of company you're hoping to work for that you're speaking to today. I'm reading something from William. I have a relatively recent resume from you all, and it's been a real moneymaker. I do short contract assignments all the time, so it gets used a lot with great success. Oh, I think that's awesome. Okay, but suddenly I'm not getting responses from recruiters. Is there some recent change in screening algorithms, or is it more likely due to more people chasing fewer jobs? If it's been really recent, William, in the last month, I'd say it probably has more to do with the competition than necessarily a change in an algorithm. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any major changes in the algorithms. Applicant tracking softwares are pretty slow systems and pretty big ones. Companies don't change them all the time or switch to new ones because they're such a pain in the butt to implement and get everybody on the same page. And so once they have one, they kind of stick with it. That said, either the super high tech companies that are really into new tech, and some of the really, really big ones are kind of at the forefront where they're now starting to leverage AI, artificial intelligence. And really when they're using artificial intelligence, they're kind of attaching it on top of their existing applicant tracking system. That said, it shouldn't necessarily suddenly alter the response you're getting. What I will say is that given that you do a lot of short-term contracts, I would start kind of leaning back on your network, or leaning on your network a bit more and those that you've developed. So if you see that there's a role that you're going after or something like that, I would start looking, running advanced searches on your LinkedIn profile to see, well, who do I know who has some sort of connection to that company, and see if they can help you kind of bypass some of that competition. Because I think you're going to be seeing that more and more. Networking is going to become a really strong, it's always been important. I think it's going to become even more important during this super crowded job market to help you get past some of that other competition. I mean, of course, having a resume that, truly speaks to your need, to your skill set, and the goal that you're pursuing, 100%. But those connections will help you, get past some of that red tape and get through some of that white noise that a lot of employers are seeing right now. That said, the only thing I'll say is because you do a lot of short-term assignments, if you've been adding those to your resume, take a second look and see how long is your resume getting, because you may need to kind of tweak it again. And I don't know, you said relatively recent, so maybe that's not a concern, but depending on how your resume is structured, I know that if you're, an independent contractor, sometimes that's listed, and then your different projects or some of your different projects are highlighted below. Some people have them as individual projects depending on like how long you worked with different employers. There's a few different ways you can set it up. Just be cognizant of how long is the resume getting, and is the most relevant and important information still the stuff that's bubbling up towards the top? What does that top third or even top half of that resume look like? Because that's ultimately what the human is looking at and drilling in on or focusing on. And we know that based on a study that was done by ResumeGo a year or so ago with thousands of resumes and recruiters, that they typically prefer about a 2-page resume, believe it or not, regardless of years of experience. And so if you're trying to push it to a 1-page, or it's now like stretching on to like 3.5, 4, that could also be slightly a concern. So that's something to keep in mind. Somebody was asking about past month exactly, and it's remote work 100%. One thing, William, if it isn't emphasized, because this wasn't as big of a deal say a month ago, if your resume is not explicitly showing your experience working remotely, if that wasn't, if for location you didn't have virtual, or you didn't have something about like working with a 100% virtual team or something like that, if you didn't have some of those phrases in your resume, you might want to insert those in a couple spots, and at least in like the message or the cover letter that accompanies your application, make it clear that you have X years of experience working 100% remotely, or whatever it is, that you're very comfortable and you're confident that you can, you're used to delivering results in a remote environment. That will actually help you. I emphasize this with anybody because frankly, every job is remote now, at least not every, but most jobs are remote right now. And if that is a concern of yours, keep that in mind, that if you've worked remotely in the past, that's a great selling point. Make sure that you are emphasizing that. For anybody who's considering, a job search in the near future, if your company had to switch to a remote environment and you played a role in helping make that happen, either identifying certain tools and software, training people on it, moving a process that was always face-to-face to now this remote, environment, put that in your brag book. Jenna, if you could put in, if Top Resume could comment with the link for the brag book, I believe the title is like the one thing that professionals do to get ahead or something along those lines. If you guys don't have a brag book, put one together. But I definitely make sure that you're documenting those things so that when it comes time to update your resume, you can insert them in where it makes sense. Okay, another question. What's the right way to reconnect with old colleagues when it comes time for me to provide references? Is it still okay to reach out if I haven't been great at keeping in touch? Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people tend to come out of the woodwork when they suddenly need references. A couple things to keep in mind. If you've decided that you're going to be searching for a job, or if you've started the search and you're just thinking about it, I think it's always smart to identify who those resources or references might be up front. And, take the time now to reconnect with them and say, hey, considering what's going on right now in the world, there's nothing wrong with just reaching out to be like, I've just been thinking about you lately. How are you doing? What's it like? Are you guys working remotely? How's it going? If they have kids, how's homeschooling going? All that fun stuff, right? This is definitely a time where we're seeing more people reach out and organize Zoom get-togethers and house party on the app and all that kind of stuff. So take advantage of those opportunities. Definitely reach out and just check in with people. So if you can, start reconnecting with them at the beginning of your search before you necessarily need them for a reference, or just say, hey, I'm actually thinking about looking for a new job. When the time comes, would you be all right with me using you as a reference? I'm happy to provide you with the most up-to-date version of my resume, that sort of thing. If it's kind of like, well, that's moot. I need my reference sooner rather than later. I don't have the time to necessarily do that. Then 100% reach out anyway. let them know, hi, I know it's been a while. I hope all's well. Do a little stalking online, check out where they are on LinkedIn, say, oh, I noticed you've got this promotion, you're doing this, that's great. You know, if you guys are Facebook friends and you never look at each other or communicate, oh, I saw that, you know, recently you did blah, blah, blah. You know, make it personal. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I'm in the middle of a search. If it's all right with you, I'd love to put your name down as a reference. I'm happy to provide you with the most up-to-date version of my resume, and any other details, that you think would be helpful. Normally when anybody asks me and it's somebody that I haven't talked to in a while, or I worked with them a really long time ago, and frankly, I don't remember. Before this job, I was at my last employer for over 10 years. And so many people, I'm like, at what point were we working together? What year was that? What was your exact, I don't remember those things anymore. I always ask them, like, please send me a copy of your resume. Do you remember kind of around the time we worked together? That sort of thing. And is there anything in particular you would like me to emphasize or reiterate when should they contact me? That's typically what I ask, me as a reference. Not everybody's going to think to ask those questions so you want to be prepared to actually give that information to them. I'm attaching the most recent copy of my resume. Also, be very clear about, I'm going for this type of role, because it may not be the same type of work you were doing a while back. With your reference. So always be very clear about, I'm interviewing for, or I'm about to start looking for a role, this type of role in this type of, in this type of company or that sort or industry. I'm attaching the most recent copy of my resume. If you haven't kept in touch, you probably want to give them a quick little synopsis of what's going on in your life or what has gone on in your life since you last talked to them. Since we worked together in December of 2017, when we were both at blah, blah, blah company, I've been, doing this type of work. Most recently, I was here doing X, Y, and Z. I'm now looking at these types of opportunities. If it's all right with you, I'd love to put you down as a reference. Should they have any questions about, X, Y, and Z qualities or, my experience at that organization, that sort of thing. You want to prepare your references the same way often recruiters will prep a third-party recruiter will prep a candidate for an interview. You want to prep your references. And if you haven't kept in touch, it's not the end of the world. I feel like everyone comes out of the woodwork when they're looking for a job. It's very common. The best thing to do is just make sure that you are supplying the right information to your reference, and also make sure you ask them what's the best email address or phone number for me to provide to them, that sort of thing. Always get their permission, always find out what contact information they want you using. It's much more likely to go in your favor if they're on board and you've properly prepared them. Okay. Oh goodness, I did not realize it is already 2:00. If there aren't any other questions, I know there was one. I am going to answer one because I got it on Twitter from my alma mater, Go Red Foxes, Marist College. What should applicants do when they've been through the first round of interviews and have not heard back from an employer? I think that's a really great question. One is definitely follow up. This is a weird timing kind of situation. If you were in the middle of interviewing and you thought things were going well and suddenly it's kind of gotten a little radio silence, or they seem to be kind of, giving you the cold shoulder, it's a crazy time. One, definitely Google the name of the company and just see, have they, is there anything publicly announced about the organization? Who knows what's going on? If there isn't, 100% reach out, be like, hi, follow it up. Just want to see how everything's going for you and your team. I know it's such a crazy time. It seems like years ago at this point that I was in the office and we were talking about this potential opportunity. I know things, obviously I know a lot has changed since then. Would just love to get a sense of, are you still hiring for this position? Am I still in, am I still in the running for it? Say it much more articulately, please. And, is there any additional information I can provide to you? Do you have a sense of the timeline? Those sorts of things. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and give them a call if you've been given permission to call them directly. If not, email them directly, but 100% follow up. If there's a new piece of information you can present, you've been working on this skill since you last talked to them, you know, that sort of thing, bring that up. Give them a reason to want to talk to you again, if you can. And then I know this is not an unpopular opinion, but I know it's not what anyone wants to hear. But even if you have a really great interview, go find a few other opportunities to pursue. It's so important not to get too hung up on one job opportunity, especially right now because things are so up in the air. If it doesn't work out, it's not meant to be right now. And that's okay. But the second you get called in and they say, we want to do a phone interview, we want to do a virtual interview, great. Go find a couple other leads to pursue. That's really important. There's a few reasons for that. One, if you're pursuing a few other things, you can't get so hyper-focused on this one opportunity. And so if it doesn't work out, it's not as much of a, it's not as big of a letdown. Two, if you get really focused on one opportunity and you think it's a shoo-in and it doesn't work out, if you haven't been pursuing other leads and you're kind of back to nothing and you have to start over again, it's really hard to build that momentum. You always want to keep an active pipeline of job leads that you're nurturing, that you're working on, whether it's talking to someone on the phone, finding a few new things to apply for and follow up on. You want to continue filling that pipeline so you're always working on a few different opportunities, even when you're interviewing, especially when you're interviewing. Because, hey, in an ideal situation, you'll get 2 offers and you'll get to, choose. But more often than not, it's so that if that opportunity that you really think is going to work out doesn't, you are not starting back at zero, because that's a really hard place to get to. I know that. I've been there. And so you want to keep a few different leads going. So definitely follow up on that opportunity. See what they say. If you get absolutely no response, wait a week and a half, follow up again. Do that no more than 3 or 4 times, I'd say, right now. And then when things calm down, maybe try again in a month. If they give you some sort of answer, the idea is you're trying to get a timeline. They may say, I'm so sorry, we do love you, but the job's on hold. Okay, still pursue other opportunities. Worst comes to worst, you get another job and they come back to you and it's great, and you have to, quit that other job for the one you really wanted. Not the end of the world. So something to keep in mind. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate the questions. If there's a particular topic you want me to cover, because I want to do this every Tuesday, I'd love to do so. Please let me know. You can put it in the comments now. You can, message me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Let me know. I can do an entire one on interviewing remotely, anything on phone interviews, video interviews. I can do anything on how to structure your resume for a remote job. I'm happy to go into one particular topic. I'm also happy to just do a free-for-all and answer anything that comes in. So let me know, and we'll just keep playing with these until we have something that works for everyone. Thank you all again. I'm Amanda Augustine, career expert for Top Resume, Top Interview, and Top CV. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and I will be happy to try and answer some of those via post later. Bye, everyone.